talk about June. So we just entered July and I wanted to do my June reading wrap up. A lot of these books that I'm going to be talking about today, I actually talked about in my mid-year book tag video. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. But in June, I read 9 books, which is absolutely insane. That is by far the most books I've read in a month in probably the past 2 years. Okay, more than that. I only started like reading hardcore again in the past 2 years, but I probably haven't read that many books in a month since I was in like middle school or high school. So very impressed with that. And I read about 3,575 pages and my average rating was 4.06. So 4 stars. I feel like I was very generous with my ratings this month. And I don't know if that's something that's going to change with time, like the more books I read, if I'm going to get more specific with my ratings or if I'm going to not give out so many 4 and 5 stars. But I really enjoyed almost all the books that I read this month. So these genres, I read 2 romance, 1 horror, 1 fiction and 1 nonfiction, 2 fantasy and 2 mystery. So I really was just all over the place. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first book I read this month, I actually listened to the audiobook of The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. And as I have said before, I loved the beginning of the book. I was really enjoying getting to know all the characters and there was a lot of intrigue, and I feel like there were so many characters and storylines introduced that felt very meaningful, you know, like maybe it was a bit of foreshadowing, and they ended up being completely pointless because the plot twist was something that I personally don't think anyone could have seen coming because it was that outlandish. So I ended up giving it like a 3, but I'm tempted to lower it to like a 2.5. I just don't know. I don't want to be so hard on it because I really did have a good time listening to it. It passed the time of my drive very quickly. I listened to it driving home from Alabama, but overall, like, I haven't thought about it since, and anytime I do think about it, I get upset because I'm like, there were so many ways that the book could have gone that would have been better than the way it actually went. So pretty disappointing, because I really did love The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I will be giving Fury another chance. So I'm going to give this author another shot with Fury. I'm not sure when I'm going to get around to reading that, but it is on my list. The next book I read this month was The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. This is the second book in the Crowns of Nyaxia, is that how you say it? Nyaxia series. And it was so fun. It was so good. I gave it 4 stars. I really have been enjoying the characters. Overall, this book really kind of exceeded my expectations for where I thought it was going to go. I was really curious and confused at the end of book 1, and book 2 just did everything I wanted it to and more. And I was really pleased with the way it ended. The next book was Killer Instincts by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the second book in the Natural series, and I had such a fun time reading it. It is young adult mystery, basically Criminal Minds, but for teenagers. And it was so fun. Another 4 stars. The writing is young adult, it's YA, so it's about what I expected for a young adult. I feel like when I'm reviewing or rating books, you have to do it with the lens of the genre it's written in. So yes, this is mystery, but I'm not gonna rate it the same way that I rate, what was the other mystery? Oh, The Maidens. So like, I'm not gonna rate The Maidens and Killer Instincts on the same scale, if that makes sense. This one was way better. But it's so outlandish and it's so dramatic. You have the teenage angst. It's exciting. It's fast paced. There, you know, just every possible thing that could happen happens, and they all have such tragic backstories and just so over the top drama, and I loved it, and I'm very excited to read the last 2 books in the series. I then read Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli. I looked up how to say that name, and I think that's how you're supposed to pronounce it, but I read it on my Kindle, and it took a minute to get into it. I think this setting was not what I expected, and so I was struggling to really get into the world. But once I was in it, oh my gosh, I was in it. I was hooked. This book was so good. I mean, I was on the edge of my seat, like from halfway to the end. It is enemies to lovers, about like witches, and so it was so good. It was enemies to lovers done right. There was so much tension the whole time, and you're just worried like what's gonna happen because they're enemies, but it was so good, and I cannot wait for the next one. Rebel Moth, I actually can't remember what the second one is called, but I think it comes out in February. I will fact check that when I edit this video. Then I read my first nonfiction book of the year, which was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. And I listened to the audiobook where she narrated it, and it was really tough. I talked about it in depth in my mid-year book tag video because this is one of the books that surprised me. I do recommend that you read it. Maybe check trigger warnings first. I kind of knew what to expect going into it because my mom has read it, but it's heavy and it's a lot, but it was a really, really good read. And so I gave it 5 stars. Another Kindle book that I read this month was Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. Again, I talked about this a lot more in my book tag video, but the funny thing about that video is I actually never said the name of the book. I was editing it and I realized that I just kind of went into it without saying anything. So Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. It was so good. Another book that kind of took me a while to get into it because I'm not huge into like 70s. But once we're really introduced to the characters, I fell in love. These 2 best friends, you're following them from the time they're like 13 until they're in their like, what, 40s or something. And oh, it's just so good. It devastated me. This was the first book and the only book this year that has made me cry. And it wasn't a cute, delicate, composed cry. It was ugly, sobbing tears, hiccuping, red-faced, unable to control myself. I recommend 5 stars. If a book can make me feel that way, it deserves 5 stars. I would recommend it. The next book was another book I gave 5 stars to, and that is Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. Oh my goodness, this book was so much fun. I listened to the audiobook, and the entire time it was like I couldn't listen to it fast enough. Like I just wanted to keep listening to it and see what was gonna happen next. And it was so good. It was not fast paced or anything, but the story was so good and so well written, and the characters were so real that I was just dying to know what was gonna happen. Maybe a poor choice of words, but anyway, I loved this book so much, and I am very much looking forward to watching the movie. I still have not seen it, but I will. Then I read a library book, Holly by Stephen King. I obviously picked this book up because of the name. This book was really good. I will say it's my second Stephen King book. The first one, loved, so I knew I wanted to read more of Stephen King. But I did pick this up on a whim because it's my name, and I did not do the proper research. This is the 3rd in a series. There's actually like 5 other books that I was supposed to read before reading this one. Plot-wise, I didn't really miss anything, but there was a lot of like character building that I missed by not reading those other books, and there were several events that they kept referring back to that I have no clue what they're talking about, obviously, because I didn't read them. But this book was so interesting. You start in 2012 with like the bad guys, so you know right off the bat who's the bad guy, what they're doing, how they're doing it, like everything. And then it jumps to 2021 with Holly, and she is an investigator picking up the case and trying to figure out, put all the pieces together to figure out what's going on. My one complaint for this book, because it takes place in 2021, he puts COVID into like every chapter, which not for me. I didn't love it. A lot of references to wearing masks and being vaccinated and, you know, politics regarding COVID, and people have COVID and are dying of COVID, and it was just a lot. I was able to kind of push past it and put it to the back of my mind, but that is a huge, it doesn't really impact the plot that much, but it is, the setting is like COVID. So if that's not something that you want to read right now, maybe skip this book. Ugh. I don't even want to talk about this next book. So this next book I have been wanting to read for like a year at this point. I finally got it from the library and I read it, fully anticipating that it would be a high 4 or even 5 stars. I have read one other book by this author and loved it. I didn't love this one so much, and I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of, maybe not hate for it, but I feel like this is going to be a very controversial opinion. But I read Beach Read by Emily Henry, and I wanted to like it so bad. I wanted to love it. I wanted this to be a favorite book. I wanted to finish it, this is the library version, and like have to go out and buy my own copy right away so I could annotate and all that stuff. I don't think I'll ever think about this book again, except with like disappointment. The beginning was great. It set the story up wonderfully. I really love our female main character, January. I feel like she was a very well-written, well-rounded character. The setting with her family and background and everything that's going on in her life was great. I loved it, and I was so ready for the story to really take off. And then it lost me. It didn't lose me because I kept reading it, but the entire time I was reading it, I kept waiting for it to get better. Like I kept waiting for all of the like emotions and feelings that everyone else apparently gets when reading the book to hit me, and it just never did. And I think the reason why is the male main character, Gus. What do y'all see in him? Like, please tell me, what am I missing? I don't like him. I don't get the appeal with Gus, and I feel like everyone, he's like number 1 on their book boyfriend list. I don't see it. He doesn't communicate well. He's pretty rude. And just a lot of the times when he did have those like big professions of love, they felt not genuine because he hadn't done anything else in the book to prove it. It was just like, oh, how can you not know that I love you when I haven't shown you at all that I love you? Just take my word for it, but I'm not going to talk to you until you have a breakdown and beg me to talk to you. Like, I don't want to be with someone like that. And that is very much the vibe I got from him. And then, this is a spoiler. I'll put a timestamp for if you haven't read the book and you don't want to hear the spoiler. But the whole him still being married and then his wife wanting to get back with him and he considers saying yes. What was that what reaction was that supposed to have in me? Because it just made me disgusted that he thought about it. Like, I guess the whole point is it's supposed to be like realistic, but if I'm not over my ex, I'm not gonna be in a relationship with someone else, especially a relationship with someone who I have apparently been in love with since college. I don't know, it just didn't add up for me. I gave it 3 stars because it was a fun read, and obviously everyone else loves it. And I love Emily Henry's writing, and I love her ability to write groups of people that feel so inclusive and homey and comfortable. Like, I wanted to meet Pete and Maggie. Like, I wanted to meet all those people, and I wanted to go to to their beach house and everything like that. So she's really good at writing community, and that's one of the things I love about her writing. I think maybe I just had really high expectations going into it, and in this case it did hurt. So broke my heart. But I think maybe it's just a case of it's not for me. I'm definitely going to continue reading Emily Henry because I loved Happy Place, and again, love her writing, so I think maybe that was just the wrong book for me. That is all of the books that I read this month. I am very much looking forward to July. I think I'm gonna read just as much, hopefully more. So let me know if you have read any of these books and what your thoughts are on them. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.